Radhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Bharadhare Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Bharadhare Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachare Yamuna Tira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Bharadhare Gopi Jana Ballava Giri Bharadhare Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachare Yamuna Tira Vanachare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Srimad Paramahansa Parivrajacharis Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Shri Giri Govardhan Ki Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Sankirtan Yagya Ki Gopremanande. All glories to their Sama devotees. All glories to their Sama devotees. All glories to their assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 23, Maharaj Prithu's going back home, verse 39. Anudinam idam adarena shrinvan prito charitam pratayan vimukta sangha bhagavate bhava sindho pota pade sa cha nipunam labhate ratim manushya. Anudinam idam adarena shrinvan pritu charitam pratayan vimukta sangha bhagavati bhava sindhu potapade sacha nipunam labate ratim manushya. Anudinam idam adarena shrinvan pritu charitam prartayan vimukta sangha bhagavati bhava sindhu potapade sacha nipunam labate ratim manushya. Anudinam idam adarena shrinvan pritu charitam prartayan vimukta sangha bhagavati bhava sindhu potapade sacha nipunam labate ratim manushya. Anudinam, day after day, idam, this, adarena, with great respect, shrinvan, hearing, Prithu Charitam, the narration of Prithu Maharaj, Pratayan, chanting, Vimukta, liberated, Sangha, association, Bhagavati, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhavasindhu, the ocean of nescience, Pota, the boat, Pade, whose lotus feet, Sa, he, Cha, also, Nipunam, complete, Labhate, achieves, Ratim, attachment, Manushya, the person. Translation: whoever with great reverence and adoration regularly reads, chants, and describes the history of Maharaj Prithu's activities will certainly increase unflinching faith and attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord. The Lord's lotus feet are the boat by which one can cross the ocean of nescience. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The word Bhavasindhu Potapade is significant in this verse. The lotus feet of the Lord are known as Mahatpadam. This means that the total source of material existence rests on the lotus feet of the Lord. As stated in Bhagavad Gita chapter 10 verse 8, Aham Sarvasya Prabhava, everything is emanating from him. This cosmic manifestation, which is compared to an ocean of nescience, is also resting on the lotus feet of the Lord. As such, this great ocean of nescience is minimized by a person who is a pure devotee. One who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord need not cross over the ocean, for he has already crossed it by virtue of his position at the Lord's lotus feet. By hearing and chanting of the glories of the Lord, or the Lord's devotee, one can become firmly fixed in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord. This position can also be achieved very easily by narrating the history of the life of Prithu Maharaj regularly every day. The word Vimukta Sangha is also significant in this connection. Because we associate with the three qualities of material nature, our position in this material world is full of difficulties. But when we engage in the devotional service of the Lord, by the process of Shravanam and Kirtanam, we immediately become Vimukta Sangha, or liberated. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 23rd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Maharaj Prithu's Going Back Home. Anudidam idam adarena shrinvan Prithu charitam prartayan vimukta sangha Bhagavati bhavasindhu potapade sacha nipunam labate ratim manushya. Whoever with great reverence and adoration regularly reads, chants, and describes the history of Maharaj Prithu's activities will certainly increase unflinching faith and attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord. The Lord's lotus feet are the boat by which one can cross the ocean of nescience. Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachade Shatarane Vanchakalpaturibhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Paditanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Yes, well, continuing and basically concluding the detailed description of Maharaj Prithu and all the different things that he did, and yes, all the really quite amazing things that he said. It's all very foundational to our Krishna consciousness. Really very amazing. And this verse is basically, it's the last verse in this 23rd chapter of the 4th canto, and it is emphasizing the value, of course, of hearing and chanting the narrations about Prithu Maharaj. They enrich one's devotional attitude. They do all sorts of things, actually, but one of the things is enrich one's devotional attitude. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur made the point that Madhavatiti Bhakati Janani, that the special occasions to do with Lord Madhava, Lord Krishna, they're like the mothers of our bhakti, of our devotional mood, and yes, our devotional attachment to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is also the same thing, but just from a very slightly different perspective. But basically the point in a broad sense is that anything done in connection with the Lord, any words spoken, any words heard, any words thought of and meditated upon and described, and so many things, and devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or as Prabhupada makes the point here in the purport, service to the devotees. Service to the devotees and hearing about the devotees. One should not make distinctions between the pastimes of the Lord and the activities of Prithu Maharaj. Yes. And whenever possible, devotees should attempt to induce others to hear about Prithu Maharaj. It's really quite something. So, the material world, of course, it is sort of like a nightmare. I think we've all had nightmares at some points in our lives, and sometimes you wake up after that thinking, gosh, that was just really something very strange and extraordinary in an unpleasant way. But that's what material life is. Yesterday I was reading in the 8th canto, Srila Prabhupada was making the point that that materialistic people, they have a type of enthusiasm, at least that's very common, a type of enthusiasm and a type of optimism that here I am in this world, and there's so many possibilities, so many opportunities, so many situations that I could work with to make auspicious results for me. This is so common. This is sort of the underlying attitude of practically every materialist, other than those who have been so battered by the waves of material nature that they've come to the point of more or less giving up, or just they can see through it at least to some degree. So that's what it's like in this material world, that it may look good, and when one is optimistic, then almost any situation may look good. But actually the real prospects within this material world are just all bad. As we read that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Prabhupada's spiritual master, would do sometimes, because he had a sort of a background in his a little bit earlier days, he would do things like palmistry and astrology. And sometimes while he was the acharya and the preacher and the great spiritual leader, then sometimes people, because so many people are concerned about these types of things, so many people would come forward and sort of just offer their hands to him, a hand with the idea that, can you please read my palm and tell me, what's going to happen. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, at least the explanation, description is there. Sometimes he'd just refuse, but sometimes he would take the hand and look at it and examine it a bit, all the different features of the palm, but then he would just close it, the person's hand, and say, all bad. Just chant Hare Krishna. Because even if you have Sri Sri Radha Radhanath Sri Giri Govardhan Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai, even if you have a good future somehow or other by material terms, then actually it's only going to lead to bad sooner or later. In many cases it'll be sooner, because if a person has opportunities for material enjoyment and they utilize those opportunities, then generally they get caught up in sinful activity as part of the process of trying to utilize the good opportunities for material enjoyment. So it means that quite soon the problems, the reactions will descend on their head, and it will be very unpleasant. And in other cases, well, another point I was reading, it was the second chapter of the 8th canto, and Srila Prabhupada is making the point that that this material world, even if you, the point was that on this level of the material world, compared to a much higher level of the material world, he was actually, the verse had said that the young ladies in the demigod communities, their material bodies are of such high natures that they would just constantly emit very beautiful fragrances. And so there was a description of what goes of the place, Trikuta Mountain, and what goes on there. There was a beautiful lake there, and those young ladies would bathe in the lake, and the fragrance of their bodies would be imparted to the waters of the lake, and then to just the air around. And in this way, the atmosphere was, well, heavenly, just that's what it was. And Srila Prabhupada makes the point, I think you can imagine the point he makes. Prabhupada makes the point there that our bodies also emit fragrances or odors or whatever you might call them. But the problem with that situation with our material bodies is that we have to use some fragrant sort of deodorant or perfume or whatever you may call it, some fragrant substance, put it on our bodies just to hide the unpleasant fragrances. In fact, historically, that is actually the origin of the perfume industry, at least from Europe, is that the people, I remember reading one report or maybe a devotee was telling Prabhupada that in the biggest palace in France, which is the biggest palace in Europe, Versailles, that the devotee had been taken around on a tour, because they do tours of these big palaces and places, and he noticed one very interesting point, which really struck him, was that there were actually no bathrooms. There actually were not just a few scattered in, obscure places, but there are actually no bathing facilities at all. And so these people, and they're the, you could say, the cream of that society. What would they do? They'd use perfume. And they might take a bath once in a year. And it sounds, sort of unbelievable, but this is what they say. But in the meantime, the other 364 days or so, they just slap on some of this perfume. And in this way, the perfume industry flourished. So this material world, particularly on this level, well, not just particularly, but on this level where it's sort of in the middle of the range of situations in the material world, there are much worse, but there are much better. And in our situation, we see some good, some bad. Some of the bad is very extreme, and the good is not very extreme, but it's good enough. Like I read, when Prabhupada went to Mauritius, Srila Prabhupada, of course, he'd been so many places, and eventually in 1975 he visited Mauritius, and he had heard before he went that Mauritius is this heavenly island. And then he went there and he saw that it's not really so heavenly. It's not really so heavenly. And Prabhupada, if you want to go and swim in the sea, you can do that, but there's a lot of coral, and the coral is razor sharp. Razor sharp. So you've got to be extremely careful, otherwise, if your feet touch it, they just get torn, and your hands just get torn. So Prabhupada said, yes, it is not as nice as Hawaii, but he had been told something to the effect that it was like Hawaii or a competitor with Hawaii, but sorry, It's just not. So this is the material world. This is the material world. and in intelligent person, of course, when we say intelligent, a person who is only intelligent and not stupid at all is just the most elevated, advanced devotee. And then there's degrees of mixture of some intelligence and some degree of foolishness till you reach a 50-50 point. And then down at the end of the scale, you get people who just, Lord Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita, people in the mode of ignorance. They when they have to make decisions between shall we do this or do that type of decision, they spontaneously every time choose the wrong thing. So, but otherwise, people who are, shall we say, intelligent enough, Prabhupada basically more or less puts it like that, people who are intelligent enough, who've gone through the difficulties or some of the difficulties of material existence, at some point having gone through that, then they realize, at least some realization comes that I cannot just continue like this. I just cannot continue like this. I must change my ways. And if they're fortunate, they get the association of devotees, and then changing their ways becomes taking to Krishna consciousness. Yes, so, but the point, or a point here, is that if we become that fortunate that through the association of devotees we get the opportunity to really take to Krishna consciousness, then in doing that, there are certain things which will just assist with our efforts in taking to Krishna consciousness. They'll just help us. And so one of those things is that we must hear and chant. Prabhupada says in the purport here, verse 39, by hearing and chanting of the glories of the Lord or the Lord's devotee, one can become firmly fixed in the service of the lotus feet of the Lord. Yes, so there, in a sense, there's no difference. In fact, it may even be better, more advantageous or more beneficial to hear the glories of the devotees, because they immediately reflect the glories of the Lord and how wonderful the Lord is, and how, because this person is a devotee, they have imbibed so many nice qualities. And in this way, Prabhupada, the way Prabhupada puts it here is, this position being firmly fixed in the service of the Lord, in service of the lotus feet of the Lord, this position can be achieved very easily by narrating the history of the life of Prithu Maharaj regularly, every day. Narrating, the thing is, if you narrate, you also hear. Basically, it's unavoidable that if you're narrating something, you're going to be hearing it. So in this way, narrating and hearing, that's very good. But at the very least, hear about the glories of the Lord or the Lord's devotee. And if you hear nicely, if you really hear nicely, just like when you narrate, you hear, But if you really hear nicely, you'll find yourself more or less impelled to narrate, because the subject matter and the experience of hearing the subject matter about Prithu Maharaj or Lord Nrsingadev and the devotees, Prahlad Maharaj, and so on and so forth. There's a transcendental potency in that, in hearing. And when you hear, that transcendental potency goes in through the ears and straight to the heart. And in this way, the heart becomes purified and the attachment develops. The attachment develops. So hearing produces chanting, generally, and chanting produces hearing or involves hearing, and it's all very auspicious. We've perhaps mentioned before, anyway, in one biography, there's one biography from some years ago of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and one thing that's described there is how one American indologist type of person, he's American, this is in the 1930s, and India was not like a popular subject for study, but you did get some. So he was one of them, professor type fellow. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta made a very, you could say complex or very in-depth description of the eight, the Das Avatar, the 10 of the well-known avatars of Lord Vishnu. And, interesting point, how from number 1 through to number 10, there is a gradual development of the nature and the qualities of each one in succession. Interesting point. So he gives this description, and, in his quite elevated English language, and at the end he asks the man, so, basically, how did you find it, and how did you find my description? And the man, it's been quite beyond him. And the man, all he can think of to say is, I'll have to think about it. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, in effect, tells him, no, don't think about it. Because if you think about it with your materialistic mind, you'll just naturally think so many wrong things. So what you must do is hear about it. Because if you hear about it, first of all, you get from devotees, from qualified devotees, first of all, you get the right information, but secondly, there's a certain potency, a certain Shakti in that sound vibration coming from the qualified devotees, which, among other things, gives capacity to the limited intelligence of the conditioned soul to actually comprehend the subject matter. So therefore, the idea there is don't think about it with your just ordinary materialistic mind, but hear about it from devotees. So like this, there are so many pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and different forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's so many instructions and descriptions and elaborations given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his different forms and under different circumstances. The information is very important. and how you get the information so that you don't get some sort of twisted version of the information. That's very important. But then the Shakti which is there, in the words of the elevated devotees, it just has such an impact. And this is why the distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books, this is one of the many reasons why the distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books is so essential, you could say. Certainly very important, but even essential. As Prabhupada said, when you're out distributing his books in the streets or door to door or wherever you may be doing it, and then you meet people, you talk to people about the books. So Prabhupada, one thing Prabhupada said was, don't get too much into trying to describe yourself how nice the book is. Prabhupada actually said, what will your speech for 2 minutes achieve? Not as much as just reading a little bit of the book. So Prabhupada really encouraged that you encourage people to read the book. Because there's a potency. Of course, there's correct information at every step in Prabhupada's books, but then there is the potency. Of course, it depends on the level of the devotee who's doing the narration or explaining. But the more elevated the devotee, the greater the impact will be, the greater the potency will be, and the greater the effect will be on the audience. Yes, so therefore, Srila Prabhupada's books have unique importance amongst other literatures, even the literatures written by previous acharyas. So yes, Maharaj Prithu, it has been mentioned, and it's a part of the Bhagavatam, which is sometimes referred to in the sense or from the perspective that, is this, this is kind of like it's a little strange in a book which is, as we understand generally, Bhagavatam, from beginning to end, is just the highest manifestation of transcendence. But then, if there are a few verses here at the end of this chapter, you already read them over the last so many days. One who hears this narration 3 times about Maharaj Prithu will become very reputable, will develop, it could be taken just to be famous, but will develop a good reputation. If, up until that point, he has not been recognized in society. And he'll become a great scholar, even if up to this point he's been illiterate. In other words, hearing of the narrations of Prithu Maharaj is so auspicious that it drives away all bad luck. Yes. And one other verse, by hearing the narration of Prithu Maharaj, one can become great. Haribol. Increases duration of life, gain promotion to the heavenly planets, and so on and so forth. And quite a number of so on and so forths. So sometimes devotees question, what are verses like these doing in Srimad Bhagavatam, which is, as far as we're aware, it's just the total embodiment and even the supreme embodiment of transcendence in a written or spoken form. So, of course, the thing, an interesting point in that regard is that transcendental, like the Hare Krishna Mahamantra for that matter, and anything transcendental is so auspicious that it has like, it can be all auspicious, which includes all auspicious, means even materially auspicious also. So and this is the main part, as I recall, in Bhagavatam, where some benefits of reading at least some parts of Bhagavatam are explained in terms of, what can easily be taken to be just like fairly regular, although very nice material benefits. But that's okay, because what do you expect? It's all auspicious. It's auspicious in every regard. But of course, we as aspiring devotees, we must not get caught up in things like this and really start aspiring for these types of things, because for us it can become a distraction from our Krishna consciousness. But otherwise, as the verse says, with great reverence, means with great respect, revering it, that, this is just so wonderful, and adoration, adoring it, just so beautiful, so lovely. If you regularly read, chant, and describe the history of Maharaj Prithu's activities, then you will achieve unflinching faith. It will increase your faith, and it will increase your attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord. Of course, that you could say that may mean that, and it does also mean, if you have a little faith but not much in these things, then it will help you increase your faith. Very good. And your attraction. But even if you have what could be called full faith, but it'll make your faith even greater. And even if you have complete 100% attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord, it'll make your attraction even greater, 108%. Why not? And actually the potential is unlimited. Yes, so in this way a person becomes vimukta sangha, liberated, and even achieves the highest liberation of going back home, back to Godhead, becoming situated in love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this all can be, the Prabhupada says in the purport, it can be achieved very easily. Very easily. If we narrate the history of the life of Prithu Maharaj, did you catch what Prabhupada said after that? This position, transcendental position, can be achieved very easily by narrating the history of the life of Prithu Maharaj regularly, every day. Regularly, every day. Yeah. It's not like when you're at school, you learn something once and then you've got it and that's it. You don't really need to learn it again. But this is something which we should just continue and continue. And as we do, not only will it fix us more in the understanding and appreciation, but it'll fix us more deeply, our realizations about these things, the application of these things, and the importance of distributing this information like this. It'll all increase, it will deepen and become richer and richer. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Any comments, questions? Yes, Mataji, please. Just a sec.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I may have missed it, but I'm wondering about the line in the purport where Srila Prabhupada says, Vimukta Sangha, that by chanting immediately. We know that chanting has different stages, and then how do we see that in reference to this immediate?
Yeah, well, the thing is that, I actually thought of that point, and therefore I have ready Bhagavad Gita chapter 14, verse 26. Mamchiyo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahmabhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. So, yes, Prabhupada translates one who engages in full devotional service. It's the verse itself just says by devotional service. Yeah. So, it's like the implication is, at least the way, as I recall, let me just check again, the way Prabhupada puts it in this purport, that we're focusing on today, that, one who has taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord need not cross over the ocean, for he has already crossed it. He may not understand that, may not be clear. So the impact that this has is so great, but in order for it to be sustained, it has to be unfailing in all circumstances. Otherwise it'll be very good, and then, it'll drift away. And that's our experience. You could say, we get in certain very good Krishna conscious situations and it helps us tremendously, and we may just feel this is it. But then, something else comes along after a while. Yeah, so, but anyway, it's a fact that that engagement in devotional service, full engagement, not partial engagement, but really full engagement, it definitely brings one to the liberated platform. Now, when you are fully engaged. But then there's the danger, it has to be maintained, as Prabhupada says, regularly every day. Otherwise it'll drift away, and then, we'll have to sort of recover ourselves again after a while. That's I've been in a number of discussions on this subject, particularly on the Bhagavad Gita verse, and that's the way devotees have generally described it or felt they understood it. Yes. So, yeah. Anyway, that's what I would say. Mm-hmm.
So just as a follow-up, you were mentioning fully engaged.
Yeah.
And my personal experience is that there's an aspect of being physically fully engaged, and then the aspect of being connected to, like emotionally, mentally connected to Krishna. And then there's a state of liberation. Is it just the practical physicality, or is it referring to the consciousness?
Is it what? Clarity?
Okay. So you were speaking about fully engaged means the liberated state. So I'm thinking, what does fully engaged mean? Is it just the physicality?
Well, to start off with that, it basically means to be fully engaged. All your being. which includes physical, psychological, gross body and subtle body, you could just say that sort of includes everything. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be rushing around doing things, although you may be. But at least your being should be really absorbed, and not that you're doing some other things with the body while your consciousness is absorbed, fully engaged. But there was one, just the very last sentence or two I missed, the rest I got. Was that? Okay. Yeah. Prabhupada one time also said that Krishna consciousness has such purifying effect. You may not notice it, the effect it's having on you. Prabhupada gave the example, just like when you're on an aeroplane, you may not realize how high you are until you look out the window. So like this, Krishna may help us in terms of perspective on our situation by giving us some experience, like the contrast of seeing the material world working and how the people are just absorbed in it and what they're going through as a result. Maybe like, then you realize my good fortune is really quite extreme. Swarup Damodar Prabhu, any comments? Jai Sachinandan Prabhu. Jai Sachinandan Prabhu needs the microphone.
Hare Krishna. I'm trying to find a reference for this one except from a purport in the Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada makes a very profound statement. He says, unless we have a pessimistic view of this material world, the desire to live it won't be there.
Right. Yeah. And there's an interesting thing in a lecture of Prabhupada's in France on Bhagavad Gita 15:15, which, if I'd thought of it earlier, I could have looked up. But Prabhupada basically makes the point. The devotee asks, 15:15, Krishna gives knowledge, remembrance, forgetfulness. And the devotee raises the question that, sometimes I find I'm remembering something material. It just comes to me. So what is this? And Prabhupada makes the point basically, as I recall, I have to look it up again to really get it right, but it's like it's Krishna's mercy to remind you where you're coming from, your situation in material life previously. So it becomes an impetus for progress in Krishna consciousness. Am I sort of connecting with you? Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.